Hello and welcome back to SJW Moments on No Bullshit. Today we're talking about the latest Predator movie, which came out last week. Simply titled The Predator, this entry was the fourth installment in the series. It was directed by Hollywood legend Shane Black, and it also starred Olivia Munn as the female, girl power, unstoppable Mary Sue character, reminiscent of Ripley from Alien or Sarah Connor from Terminator. But Munn's character wasn't nearly as main as these past ones, which were much better interpretations of female badasses. They weren't really Mary Sue's at all. We'll get to more of the Olivia Munn stuff later, as we talk through all the SJW moments in The Predator. There's really not too many if we're being honest, and I certainly don't think the social justice warrior stuff ruined this movie at all, but there are a few key plot points that, along with the Olivia Munn stuff, really start to paint a leftist, social justice type agenda. I'll explain soon, but first, let me go over my thoughts on the movie as a whole again, and also let me warn you, mild spoilers for the movie going forward, guys. I'm going to try and not spoil everything, but as we go ahead here, there will be more and more specific details about the story, which I really can't avoid getting into. For starters, I still think The Predator is a good movie. I love seeing the well-done action and comedy in the theater just a few days ago. Now with that said, the movie isn't exactly aging that well in my mind either. Sure, I would watch it again someday, but a lot of the initial excitement about it certainly begins to fade right away. And certainly one of the biggest problems is our first SJW moment. Olivia Munn's scientist character is just wrong for so many reasons. Sure, Munn is still pretty and still looking good, especially for a woman pushing 40, but her acting is still just as dull and subpar as it ever was. And while she can pull off some of the humor and comedic lines well, as soon as Munn steps into action mode, she gets pretty stiff and unbelievable. Perhaps they threw too much at her in this one, or it's just not in her wheelhouse. Or it could also have been the writing or direction, but regardless, it was pretty clear the movie wanted Olivia Munn to be the next Ripley or Sarah Connor, but clearly it didn't work out for them. Sure, Munn kicked ass in the movie. She pulls off some big stunts, some gunplay, and she even chases down an injured Predator, almost. But her character's feats didn't feel that natural. They didn't feel deserved or earned at all. It felt like she was way overpowered and indestructible, probably because she's a woman in 2018 who is getting propped up as a wannabe feminist icon by the liberal Hollywood machine. There are two main sequences I want to go over which display this feminist girl power silliness pretty well. The first is when the first Predator in the movie breaks out of the Human Science and Research Center. Initially, Olivia Munn is called in as a consulting scientist, tasked with helping the team study an injured and sedated Predator, one they had tied down at the science center. But of course, the monster immediately breaks out, killing and slaughtering nearly every person in the entire building, except Olivia Munn, of course. And sure, main characters escape death in all kinds of crazy ways in movies like this, but also, at the same time, Munn's survival is kind of written in an over-the-top, she really should have died kind of way. For example, toward the end of this segment, the Predator even walks by Munn on his way out. He sees her there, hunched over in the corner, and decides to just let her live. Now this turns out to be explained in the story down the line, but still, it was pretty ridiculous how the Predator slaughtered everyone else in the building, senselessly and indiscriminately. And then for some reason, he gives Olivia Munn a pass because girl, or vagina, whatever. And next things get even more absurd when Munn decided to grab a dart gun and try and chase down the Predator by herself. That's right, a small-framed, super skinny female scientist, seemingly with no military or combat training at all. And she all of a sudden goes all Usain Bolt and hoofs it after the alien monster, who probably has super speed by the way. But don't worry, Olivia Munn has super speed too, apparently. And she also has incredible luck. Olivia Munn's character pretty much has everything work out for her in the best way possible. And it certainly falls in the realm of what many would consider a Mary Sue type character, similar to Rey from the new Star Wars trilogy, The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi, and the soon coming Episode 9. Anyways, back to the Predator. Olivia Munn is running down the monster, who's partially injured too, to be fair, but regardless, as the Predator is getting away, Munn makes one final dash to go after him, which leads to her jumping off a building onto a moving bus that's driving by. And believe me, this looked as ridiculous as it sounds. I was honestly shocked when this first part happened. While I could get past her being spared by the Predator before and her sloppy gun handling skills prior, but once Munn jumped onto that bus, I knew we were in for some real silly pro-woman SJW bullshit. Speaking of gun skills, Olivia Munn first starts off with a long white dart gun, which she runs out of the building with at the end of this Predator escaping sequence. And I knew it looked weird at first, her holding that dart gun this whole time. It seemed pretty pointless to me. The way the Predator acted, I'm sure a couple of tranquilizer darts wouldn't do shit. And funny enough, in the end, Munn ends up shooting a dart into her own foot. After jumping onto that bus, she turns to shoot the Predator, but she ends up shooting herself, literally shooting herself in the foot. It's played off as kind of a joke, but I'll always remember it as proof that she doesn't know shit about guns and shooting. But things got even weirder on this point when, later on, Olivia Munn ends up wielding a number of other real guns, including one scene where she's firing a semi-automatic rifle, a military-grade machine gun basically, at the Predator dogs. And she shoots it like a professional soldier all of a sudden. And this just shows another part of the Olivia Munn character that really threw me off, and the movie off. She was clearly a feminist plant, a wannabe Ripley, a Mary Sue type character which the movie put in to push a leftist girl power agenda. Now, not to overdo this point too much, but there is one more Olivia Munn scene that stood out like this. Toward the end of the movie, after the Predator had been hunting the main cast in the jungle for a while, the few remaining people devise a little plan to take down the monster once and for all. Now, while the main male character dives across the area, going for one of the alien weapons, Olivia Munn jumps on the Predator's head out of nowhere and starts bashing him and shooting him in the head. And this again was one of those big moments where I was like, what? What the heck? How the hell is she doing this? And it's not to say I don't believe a woman could do something like this. It's more like I don't believe Olivia Munn could do this. She's not fit. She's not muscular at all. In fact, Munn appears to kind of be skinny and frail to me, which really makes these action scenes like jumping on the bus and jumping on the Predator's head seem super off and out of place. And in my opinion, they do this in movies like this for SJW-like reasons. It's Hollywood's way of saying, hey, look, women can be badasses too. And at face value, this wouldn't be bad either. I have nothing against a strong female character, but they have to be done right and with the right setups and actors involved. For example, I thought that Peppermint movie from a couple weeks ago did the same kind of thing, but it did it well. It had Jennifer Garner first playing a mother, who then loses her family, which leads to her turning into a badass, trained fighter and killer, trying to avenge them. And Garner looks this part too. She's pretty, but also kind of buff, which makes her a believable badass. But Olivia Munn in the Predator movie, she lacked all of this. She lacked the proper motivation, the proper backstory, and, of course, the proper body and skill set to pull it all off. And that's why, in my opinion, this attempt in the Predator failed and also made the movie a little bit worse. Now that about wraps up what I can remember about the social justice warrior, Mary Sue, Olivia Munn character. And this was not only the worst offender for the movie, it was also one of the parts that stood out as a bad part of the movie overall. Now going forward, I have a few other more smaller SJW points to make, but the rest of them aren't really that bad. A few of them I noticed at the time, but it didn't distract from the rest of the movie as much. And overall, none of these other points really tarnished the movie much either. But of course, we will still talk about them all anyway, starting with the kid in the movie, who was an autistic kid who had Asperger's or something. Initially, it's kind of endearing. The kid is the main male character's son, and we see he has problems with noises covering his ears, and eventually he has problems at school where we see some kids picking on him. This is a little sad and sympathetic of an angle, but at the same time, all this mental disability stuff really made me cringe too. The kid is immediately seen freaking out and spazzing, which was kind of an unsettling way to start things off, if we're being honest. Sure, that was the point, and his condition even became part of the story's plot at one point too, but yeah, it was a little awkward and cringy. And sure, the autistic stuff all fit in, but it was definitely pushing some SJW grounds. It felt very social justice-y, like how the left tries to push transgenders and sometimes even sexual deviants and pedos. And now it appears they're trying to champion the disabled and the autistics and Asperger's people too. This becomes even more apparent when we meet the crew of soldiers who accompany the main male character. He gets thrown into a bus with a bunch of crazy people. No, really, they're all kinds of different crazy and mentally messed up people. One guy has Tourette's syndrome and he says all kinds of different stuff, crazy curse words. One guy has post-traumatic stress disorder, and another guy even tried to kill himself. Fortunately though, this crew ends up being hilarious and totally well executed. Good comic relief. But when you combine them with the autistic kid, then you start to see how this movie is pushing a mentally handicapped, pro-autistic kind of thing. But this isn't all bad, of course, either. Like I said before, people with mental handicaps like these do deserve to be sympathized with and understood, and it's certainly a much more noble and honest cause than the feminist girl power one related to Olivia Munn's character from before, which is fueled by a failed ideology that hates on and demeans men. But there's one more part to the autistic kid that does flirt with ruining the movie at certain points. Early on, Olivia Munn says something about the kid that stands out. Upon discovering the main male character's kid is special, Munn tries to comfort him by saying how some doctors see autism as an evolution of the human race. Something about their minds actually being on another level most of us don't understand. And while at first I thought this whole bit was just some bullshit to make the guy feel better, it actually turned out to be a main part of the ending of the story. Later on, the super predator ends up capturing the little kid, which turns out to be because of this higher evolution stuff Munn mentioned before. Now, whether or not that's true in the real world about autism, I'm not sure. I doubt it. It sounds like something doctors say to parents to make them feel better, but who knows? It could be true. Regardless though, the movie really goes out of its way to push this point home. Autistics and other mentally challenged people aren't less than the rest of us. They're sometimes better even. And while this isn't the worst message in the world, it's also a little much by the end of the movie. That brings us to the final pro-social justice warrior liberal message of the movie, the global warming climate change part of the story. You see, in order to explain the increased frequency of the predators visiting Earth and hunting humans, the story uses global warming as a real-world explanation. The idea is is that the Earth is warming, so our species won't last much longer, and that means the predators are coming now more often to hunt humans while they still can. And also, another part of the predators' plan is they're capturing high-level samples of humans in order to take them home and study and gain evolutionary knowledge from them, which will help them further their own species. And this is why they're trying to take that autistic kid, like how I mentioned before. But coming back to the global warming part of this, there's definitely an air of arrogance you can see around this topic here. Sure, it's just a movie, but at the same time, you can really feel the hippy-dippy, I want to save the planet vibes from this. And I could easily see a South Park character like the aging hippie liberal douche spouting off all this environmental crap. But like with the last message about sympathizing with autistic and troubled people, sympathizing with the environment and saving the planet is hard to argue against as well. Both are good causes only an idiot would be against. And also, of all the premises we talked about today, the pro-global warming climate change stuff was really the least prevalent and probably the least offensive too. But it's still worth noting as well, especially when you combine it with everything else here. You can see there was a clear, leftist, social justice warrior-fueled agenda written into this movie. Fortunately, it was mostly the overpowered Olivia Munn stuff that brought things down. And with everything else being pretty well done, the action, the comedy, and the graphics were all top-notch, so a little feminism and anti-ableism and pro-environment stuff this movie did have certainly didn't ruin it. In the end, despite everything we went over today, I still want to see this movie do well. Not only does the cast and crew deserve it, it's also a good watch for anyone interested. That, and I really hope the sequel they set up at the end happens and pans out, because while this movie was pretty good, seeing where they go from here could be even better. What do you guys think? Did you watch The Predator last week? Do you think the social justice warriors got to the writer Shane Black's head when he went about making Olivia Munn overpowered? And did you notice any of the other SJW moments? Comment your thoughts on everything below, and thanks for watching No Bullshit. See y'all next time.